Let's talk about the aversion, because when fear comes up, we have a thought, we have some emotion, we feel it in our bodies. And for many of us, we want to end this feeling. I don't want to feel this. And so we do things to distract ourselves. We do a whole bunch of things, other behaviors that aren't productive, default behaviors that aren't productive, like avoiding or overcompensating, making a mess of it. So the biggest thing you want to do is actually, and this is going to sound almost woo-woo, but you want to sit there when you're feeling fear, is you actually want to sit there and just feel it, explore it, in fact, is how we talked about it.
Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keys. Well, this week is very interesting because I just finished interviewing JP. Now, JP is author of the book, Performing Under Pressure, The Science of Doing Your Best When It Matters Most. Now, it's interesting because JP, as a consultant, one of his number one focuses is for people to develop emotional intelligence. And I think just about every show, in my introduction or with somebody else, we talk about how important that is, yet how lacking it is, and that people are just not self-aware. Now, one of the things that he focuses on, and he has a podcast talking about the last 8%. You know, when we get into fear, when we get into these situations where we don't do the final bit, we don't share that final piece that's on our mind or do the decision that we have to make, all these things. Now, as a result of that, my encouragement is that emotional intelligence comes out of knowing self. Do you really, really know yourself well? And are you connected to that? Are you aware of what your strengths and dynamics are that's going on and those things that you might not be as strong in? So my encouragement is that you would consider, if you already haven't done so, if you've completed our personal style indicator assessment, which is rated number 1 by participants around the globe, if you've completed that, great. But what we've now launched is an eCourse, a full understanding of personal style, of yourself, of others. And again, our ability to serve others is equal to or less than our own development. So have you taken the time to learn? Now, the other thing that JP talks about, he says that the number 1 skill outside of sort of emotional intelligence is this whole concept of lifelong learning, in that if you're not using your brain, it is rotting. So the only way really to grow or even stay the same is to learn. And so are you doing the learning? Now, first of all, you are, because you are listening to the SOS podcast, so thank you for that. And my encouragement is that you would help others to get connected to the show if that's possible. So as a thank you, can you share the show? If you like what we're doing, pass it on, let other people know about it, leave a positive comment on whatever platform that you're listening on. And we very, very much appreciate your feedback or thoughts of the show. And if you have some, great insights that our guests have left with you, then share that with us so we can get that to them. And they can be encouraged from your comments as well in the work that they did, and they gave it complimentary to you. So thank you again for listening. Now here's our show with JP Pawliw-Fry, who's written the book, Performing Under Pressure. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keys, and thank you for listening. Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keys. Well, today we want to talk about the top 8%. What does that mean? Well, we're going to be able to discover that our success in life isn't doing the 90, it's getting to that last little bit where the gems are, where there's discovery to be made, where the insights are to be had. And we have an expert on this who has written a book on this. It's been all around the world, multiple languages and countries. And so welcome to the show, JP Pawliw-Fry. Now, JP, you say your last name correctly so our listeners get it right.
Yeah, Ken, I think you did pretty well. Pawliw-Fry, you got it.
Pawliw-Fry. So if I say it fast enough, away we go. So, JP, thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excited to be here. Excited to spend time and hopefully have a bit of fun.
Well, that's always a requirement of SOS. So when we think about our SOS listeners, what we typically do on the show, JP, is really get to know our guests and their journey before we get into their expertise. And I'm, very keen to get in this New York Times bestseller book and the content that you have really put together for other individuals to serve them. But before we get there, so JP, a little bit of your background. Where were you born?
I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada. Then,
and you're actually willing to admit that.
I am. I mean,
like you had a lot of control over it, right?
Oh, exactly. And in fact, at age 6 weeks old, we moved to sunny Vancouver and grew up there, and then moved to Toronto for high school and beyond, university, etc.
Okay. What did your parents do for a living?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My parents were both born and raised on farms in Saskatchewan. My father worked at John Deere, the tractor company, on the construction side, and he got moved around from Yorkton to Winnipeg to Vancouver to Toronto. In fact, it was Grimsby, which is just outside of Hamilton. That's where the headquarters for Canada was for John Deere, and we lived in a little suburb of Toronto called Burlington, and had a great kind of upbringing there. And so my dad, at about my age, in fact, I'm 52. When he was 53, he quit, and he had I think a pretty good career. But he and my mom got into rental real estate and ended up buying houses, renting them, and kind of enjoyed that for another 20 years. And they're still fantastic today, sharp, and they're around 87 years old, and just awesome parents.
Oh, great. Well, it's nice to hear that. Now, interesting, I don't know if you knew or not, but I actually grew up on the dairy farm and worked for Massey Ferguson during my college summers to pay for my degrees. So there is a little connection to the agricultural community. Pardon me?
Yeah, we don't recognize the color red, sorry.
I know.
Not allowed in our family.
Yeah, of course not. You're just all green. That's like my friend down the road. He couldn't possibly, if it's not a deer, it doesn't exist.
There you go.
I get it. I know there's a leader.
Like a deer.
Yeah, for sure. One of my friends actually owns a John Deere dealership out here. So I get that. I understand it. And I'll forgive you for it. You do make a better product, but we digress. Now, with that, with all the travel, what did that do to you as a teenager? Were you or even as a child, just being uprooted and moved around? How did that affect you?
Yeah, I mean, truly not in a great way. Not in a bad way, I mean, because I spent really kind of almost like middle school and high school in Burlington. My parents still live in the same house today. So if anything, I mean, they've almost been there 40 years. I kind of feel like, in fact, we didn't move as much as some other friends of mine. But it does sound like that. I didn't obviously recognize the 6-week-old move. I certainly do remember the move from Vancouver to Toronto. And that was, I mean, to be honest, that was a pretty big deal. But it was a pretty positive experience for me, I have to say. But I can imagine, I think why your question's a great one is, I can imagine for someone who moves, through military or for whatever reason, 5 or 6 or 8 times over the course of 10 or 12 or 15 years, that's got to be difficult. So fortunately, it wasn't too bad for me.
Right. So then you finished high school. What did you do? Did you go to university, or what was sort of your progress after that?
Sure. So I did. I went to Queen's University in Kingston, did a couple of degrees there, kind of in the sciences, and then went on to do more training in a couple of different places. So in Toronto, I did a 4-year chiropractic degree. I also went and was fortunate enough to do some training at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center with John Kabat-Zinn. And you might know his name from the mindfulness work, but I was lucky enough to do some post-grad clinical training there. And then I also did some training with Herb Benson and his group at Harvard at the, what would it be called, Mind-Body Medical Institute at Harvard. And so that kind of shaped, actually, I'll say this, that shaped me, but I think the bigger learning, because I think you're asking about my background in education, I think the fact that I was fortunate enough to take a couple of gap years and spent, a fair amount of time, not the whole time, but a fair amount of time in monasteries in Asia, I think that actually had the biggest influence on me. That's actually what got me to think about coming back and doing some of this training in the Boston area, because that's where some of the best, still is to today in some ways, some of the best research going on around mind-body medicine, psychoneuroimmunology, that whole field.
Wow. Now, you just slipped that in about going to Asia, just as a sidebar. How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So when I was finishing my undergrad, I've always been a curious sort, and I was kind of a seeker, and I was taking a world religion course, and I thought, that's kind of fascinating. And I wanted to take a year off, and found myself in Thailand and met someone who said, I just came from a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, radical or interesting. And of course, and I did a 10-day course and I did another one and so on and so on, and spent time in monasteries in Hong Kong, mainly Thailand, but also in Hong Kong, but also in India. And it really stimulated in me this idea that we have an internal technology that we are not aware of. And for someone who has a bit of ADHD, which I do, where attention was my challenge more than hyperactivity, it was such an antidote that I was like, wow, this is something. So I thought, I'm going to bring it back to the West, not knowing that, of course, people, had this is 1989. People had, preceded me in a big way. But what was great about that is that there were some fantastic centers, again, in the northeast of the U.S., but in many other places, I'm sure, as well. But at the time, both in terms of the study, but kind of research and academia, but also for me going to retreat centers. And so it's been a 30-year kind of, or however many years it's been now, 30 years, I guess. And it really has influenced me. I mean, it's influenced my professional work. I would not be doing what I'm doing right now without that experience. And so, I could talk a lot about that, and it really was something else.
Well, if you think about it, one of our colleagues, John Gray, did the same thing.
Right.
So he had spent some time there, and of course he wrote the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or the other way around.
Yeah, right.
And I was on the stage with John, but many people don't know that he spent a time, it's sort of in that same process as well. So this ability to be silent and have attention, basically our society, would you not say, is the opposite of that now?
Yeah, especially now with, our cell phones. And it's interesting because, just the term cell phone, it's like we're locked in a cell. We just don't know it.
Well, say what, JP, I've never heard that before, but that certainly does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So I think that as a way to grab our attention and give us a hit of dopamine every time we have some kind of notification, that along with just, how fast things are moving. And here's the part that I think for me was so impactful. I walked away, when people ask me, because I still do 10-day and sometimes longer silent meditation retreats, people say, well, isn't it hard not talking? And it's actually not hard not talking. It's hard not doing. Because you spend all this time from 5:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night not doing. You do 1 hour of sitting meditation, followed by 1 hour of walking meditation, followed by sitting, walking all day. And there's a talk in the evening, there's meals. But the bottom line is you're really looking inside. And for me, the most amazing part is to understand a little bit more of the terrain inside my mind. That we all have this stream of thought that come and go. It's like a sine wave of stimuli. And most of us grab onto and get hooked by some of the stimuli, a thought or an emotion or an experience or a fantasy of the future or a memory of the past. And it ends up being that we're so caught that we're not actually present. And so I think the practice is a great way to understand ourselves, our mind, and then to have a different relationship to the experiences that we have in the moment. And I could, again, go on just about this, but to me, I think that was really powerful because today we're asked to be more agile than ever. We're asked to change as fast as the world is changing around us. And if you, let's say, have a meditation practice, a mindfulness practice, you actually start to see that inside our mind is changing as fast as things are changing outside. And you create a bit of capability to be with what at first feels like the difficulty of this constant change, but then you start to realize, no, this is just the way the world is, this is the way that my mind is, and now we're less attached, and we can move and be more agile and be more adaptable. So in fact, in some ways, I understand now why mindfulness today has become such a big thing. It didn't 30 years ago, but it certainly has today, and I'm really grateful for some of the people who have really popularized the term.
Well, I agree. Be Here Now, our friend on the West Coast who wrote that book that, of course, Oprah embraced as part of that whole movement a few years ago. But let's just go back for a second. You said that you actually studied as a chiropractor. Did you ever practice?
Briefly for part of a year. And I actually loved the training because of the neurology. I'm really interested in neuroscience. And the fortunate part of that 4 years was how much time we had both dissecting cadavers, dissecting the brain, and learning about the different pathways. And so for me, that was probably, again, another really impactful experience that I loved the learning, and it kind of helped me build kind of where I am today in terms of my learning. But it's not something that I practiced for very long.
Oh. Well, obviously you are a lifelong learner and you love to consume information in learning. So here you are, you've finished this sort of time in Asia, you came back. What led you onto the path of helping others?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. I'll go back to my parents for that, really. We were a foster family for 26 years, and you learn pretty quickly. Well, first of all, you don't know what's really going on when you have kids living with you, because it doesn't kind of make sense initially. And then you start to, that becomes your life, that you always have someone living with you, sometimes a couple of people. You know, there was a family of biological 4 kids, and then we always would have 1 or sometimes 2 others. So I think I learned through modeling from my parents, I mean, especially my mom on this, the idea of service, and the idea of how fortunate we were and why it's important to, you know, be helpful to others who might not have the same opportunity. So I think that's the real answer around your question. But I think you're also, you know, looking for, well, okay, how did I start doing what I'm doing? And I'll say this, when I came back from UMass, University of Massachusetts, I was teaching at a psychiatric hospital outside of Toronto for patients with chronic stress and chronic pain. It was an outpatient, a behavioral health outpatient clinic. And we were teaching mindfulness. This is, 25 years ago, and I loved it. And some business people and then some athletes heard about it or took it and said, hey, can you teach us? And it was so funny because I'm like, well, I don't know, but I have a big interest in sport. So sure, and it just started to develop, so much so that in 1998 or so, we kind of realized, I'm also a bit of an entrepreneur, just again, from my parents' maybe background. And so I thought, hey, I can do this on my own. I don't necessarily need to be affiliated with the hospital. And so we went out and we started the organization, and then it's just grown from there. And so, I think there's so many things that drive our behavior and our action taking. And there's a ton of research on this. And, what was it for me? I don't know, but I'll say this. When I was in grad school, something that hit me was I had to give a presentation to about 150 people. And I remember getting up and presenting, and the topic, I was like mildly interested in it, like, somewhat. I don't even know what the topic was. But I remember leaving that 45-minute presentation just kind of full of juice. And I thought, wow, I really like presenting. Didn't know that at all. This is like I'm 24, 25 now, maybe older. I didn't know that at all, Ken. And so then it hit me. I'm like, wow. And it still didn't hit me for a while how I moved into what I'm doing now, but my goodness. So there's both the service, but also I realize that this is something that I have a passion around that gives me juice. And so when the two line up, I think for all listeners, this is an important point. Think about, what you love to do, the things that give you juice, and then how it can serve something bigger than yourself. And when you cross those two kind of circles, like in a Venn diagram, that's when it gets pretty powerful, because for some of the stuff that I do, and I know this is the same for you, Ken, when we're doing this kind of work, I feel, I'm sure you feel, indefatigable. I could just do this all day and all night. I really could. And a big thing of what I do now is, I speak. That's probably the big part of what I do in our organization. I could speak all the time, everywhere, because I absolutely love it. And so, anyway, long-winded answer to your question.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've been in this industry like you for a while. And recently, in the last couple of months, I had more presentations than I've had in a while. And I've never enjoyed it more. And I've done 3,000 paid presentations.
Wow.
So it's when you think about that, so, for those of you that are listening, JP and I are not having this conversation for self-centered reasons, is that are you paying attention to, as you said, juice, or we'll say purpose, and those things that inspire you? Those energize you. They don't drain you. They able to equip you with this whole area of just vibrating your body at another level. So thank you for that, JP, of just sharing that in our encouragement to our listeners that they would pay attention to those things as well.
For sure.
Now, when you think about, and let's skip into your book, and then of course your company is called Institute for Health and Human Potential, correct?
That's correct. And, our big focus is building the skill, that essential skill of the 21st century workplace, building the skill of emotional intelligence at scale. So we work with organizations all over the world, and we work at all levels, like the senior CEO and their team, all the way to the front line with product that helps organizations adapt, build the skill at scale. That's our whole purpose.
Well, and you think about it, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's what we, have our own assessments and personality assessments. And when you think about the lack of emotional intelligence that's out there and how socially awkward or ill-equipped many people are, it's a bit shocking. The need for emotional intelligence is so high.
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of things that you're hitting on. Number one, and it depends on the field, but in some of the fields that we work in that are more kind of, tech and ops, engineering, and you may have seen, we do a lot of work with groups like the U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, NASA, Intel, all these engineering-rich groups, Silicon Valley organizations, or in finance or in, banking. There's a lot of folks who have a lot of technical skill. And in fact, they're plenty smart. But what they often find is at a certain point in their career, they start to struggle because what got them to that point won't get them beyond if they're not able to have enough emotional intelligence to do two things, really. Manage themselves under pressure when they have to do difficult things, but number two, be able to connect and work with others in a way where others feel safe to have, productive conversations, where others feel safe to take a risk on a new idea and be innovative. And so I think there's this, not lack, but it's a skill that anyone can learn, but I think there are certain groups of people who haven't had to learn up to a certain point, and then they struggle. And so I think when you put that together with just how fast things are changing today, the speed of change in technology with Moore's Law, which for over 50 years now continues to be true. And so, it's...
Well, I'll just, JP, sorry to interrupt your flow, but think about it. Here we are recording a podcast digitally. You're sitting in your home office. I'm at my home office, though I have a team, and you have a team that's outside of it. Who would have thought this was even possible, 25 years ago? And if you're using the word 1998, that is when email was just starting to evolve.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Think about it. And just the ability to consume and learning, and now eCourses and all the things that go on. It wasn't even there 30 years ago. Yeah, that's a great point. We have a course, a live online facilitated course in emotional intelligence that kind of goes over the course of a week. And what's amazing is that clients are loving the fact that they're not paying. Think about getting a group of 20 or 30 people together for a 2-day or 1-day training course. For those folks, they are not paying for them to fly somewhere. They're not paying for hotel. They're not paying for food and miscellaneous. They're paying it all towards a course, and so they can train more people because of this technology, because of this disintermediation now. And I worry now, not worry that much, but there are different businesses that are going to struggle unless they find a way to adapt. But on the learning side, it's almost like learning itself has never been more important, and learning has never been so easy. And so the real question is, and this comes to some of our research, which I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm going to challenge all the listeners who are on today, are you an aggressive learner? Are you able to challenge yourself to learn something new? In our research and others' research, we find that high performers are not perfect. They make mistakes, especially under pressure. But high performers, in spite of being imperfect, what they do a number of things different than the average. And one of the big things is that they are able to learn in a more aggressive way. High performers extract, I love this stat, 3 to 5 times more information from the same opportunity to learn as an average performer. Think about that. So first of all, that is amazing stat. I've never heard that before, and I'm taking notes of it, so I'm going to hijack that.
Sure.
How are they able to do that, JP? What do they do differently that they're able to extract more?
Great question. It really starts with self-awareness. What do we do when we're under pressure? Because what comes out under pressure is our character, right? Like, we see more about ourselves. We have the potential to learn more about ourselves when we're under pressure than at any other time, number one. So there's a self-awareness piece. Number two, there's a willingness. So one of the challenges for folks who, have had some success, and I've worked, as you know, with NFL, NBA teams, Olympic athletes, and other folks, is that part of the challenge, and it's not even sometimes conscious, but when you have a level of success, you kind of think you've made it, and you think you know everything there is to know because you've gotten to a certain level. I remember outside the 1996 training center in Atlanta, there was a sign that said, "If you think you're ripe, you've begun to rot." And honestly, at the time, Ken, I thought, "Oh, that's a trite saying," but now I absolutely believe it to be true. If we feel like we've learned everything there is to know, we will begin to rot. And so there's not only self-awareness, but there has to be this willingness to say, I want to continue to learn. I'm not complete. I'm not the complete article. None of us are. And so if you can marry those two pieces together with, again, those areas that really turn you on, that give you juice, my gosh, it is such an exciting time to be alive. Like the number of podcasts that I listen to, and you've got a fantastic one, Ken, the number of great places to go and learn, whether it be I listen to a lot of long lectures. Like right now I'm listening to Thomas Friedman. 4 days ago he was on IQ Squared in England, and he was interviewed for about an hour and 15 minutes. I could listen to that all day. To go for a walk or to do the dishes and to listen to this kind of stuff, for me, I'm like absolutely in my element. And so for anyone who's listening, again, if you can extract 3 to 5 times more information than the average in any moment, when you get feedback, when someone, when a project goes awry, any situation, number one, so you can bring self-awareness, then bring some real kind of ability to a willingness to say, hey, there's more to learn. And then number 3, to really push yourself and to find that area that you can really get excited about. Those 3 elements together, oh my goodness. I mean, organizations want people like this today, because, this ability to be like this learning agility, and this is really a big part of emotional intelligence, because the thing we know is that what stops people is fear. They don't have skills to manage their brain, and fear stops them. Fear stops them. And that's, to me, sad, because it's a skill you can learn.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Now, you're familiar with Martin Seligman's work, right? Learned Optimism?
Absolutely.
And Martin was kind enough to let me put a chapter in my latest book, The Quest of Purpose. But one of his organization did a study and said, I think was one of the top 3 elements that contributed to well-being was that you were committed to lifelong learning.
Right. Absolutely.
So even from a health point of view, is that if we stop learning, you do rot. Literally, your body, your immune system, everything is negatively affected when you stop learning.
Yeah, that's it. And, there's, in some ways, I think it's a little trite, but I remember, somebody saying, like, a baby, in order to thrive, has to continue to learn, which is true. We know that for sure. And then I think, they would say, well, what differentiates us from babies? We need to keep learning in order to thrive. And I think there's some truth in that. And especially when you look at some of the data around longevity, some of the data around seniors who age well, and, that piece of learning. I mean, by the way, just for the brain, right? This. We go to, listeners, not most, some percentage of us go to the gym every day, or we do some exercise for our physical body. Bravo, right? 25 years ago, we didn't do this. 30 years ago, we didn't do this. If you went for a run 35, 40 years ago, people thought you're running away from something, right? Someone's chasing you. That's not the case today. People exercise. Well, I'll tell you, I think, and it's already happening, I think in 5 and 10 years, because now what we know about neuroplasticity, we will be going to the gym for our brain, which a big part of that is learning. A big part of that is things like mindfulness and meditation. A big part of it is some of the other online learning tools. So I think that is going to be the next frontier. And we know that neuroplasticity, which is, whatever you do, your brain changes to reflect that. So if you do nothing, your brain becomes nothing, truly. If you continue to learn and challenge yourself, your brain will continue to grow and challenge itself. It'll lay down neural pathway, myelin, specifically a sheath. That is what learning is about. So you're so right, both on the health side, but also on the flourishing side.
Thank you for that, JP. And again, it's really shocking sometimes when you read stats, and I forget the exact number. I think it's like 85% of people never read another book after college.
Wow, I was not. I think
it's somewhere around that number.
That's heartbreaking.
Now, that's not to say that you're not on your phone reading an article or the latest news about some kind of individual, but actually consuming a book, which is learning rather than just information about some accident or something like that, which is different than what we're talking about here. Right. So you're taking yourself to the next level, a new skill level, a new insight about certain information. Now, we only have about 12 or 13 minutes left, so let's jump right into this, performance under pressure in this last 8%. What can you share with the audience around this 8% concept that can transform them and they can embrace after the end of this show?
Sure. So I'm going to ask everyone listening to think about when we say the last 8%, what comes into your mind? Because for different people, different things come into their mind. But I can tell you from our research, we survey about 40,000 people a month, and we have for many years. What we know is that when we face a difficult situation where fear is involved, many of us, as opposed to approaching the last 8% of what we need to do to make good on that situation, we avoid it. We procrastinate on it. And this could be a conversation we need to have with someone, or we even start the conversation, but when we get to that last 8%, we say 85, 90, 92% of what we want to say, but when we get to the last 8%, we notice, and now there are consequences attached to what we're saying for the other person, and we see they're starting to get emotional, they're starting to get triggered, they start to infect us with their emotion. All of a sudden, as opposed to approaching that last 8%, we avoid it. And the problem is that they can't read our mind. They don't know we didn't have the full conversation. Many times we leave the conversation thinking, I talked about most of what I wanted to talk about. And we delude ourselves into thinking we had the last 8% conversation, and we didn't. And the problem is a couple months later, they're looking at us going, why are you being passive-aggressive, JP? And I'm looking at them going, why aren't you doing what we talked about? And the problem is we never had the last 8% conversation. George Bernard Shaw has a great quote. He said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. It never took place. And so last 8%, our original research was around conversations, but it's branched out now to last 8% decisions. When we have a difficult decision to make and we put it off and we put it off, we avoid it. And so
any examples that you could, for the listeners on the decision side?
Oh, sure.
That you go off the top of your head there.
Yeah. So, probably, maybe one of the bigger ones that I see is when it comes to people. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're a manager, and we find that kind of this last 8%, individuals, when someone's kind of not doing what they should be doing, they're not carrying their weight, managers don't make the decision to do something about it fast enough. They wait way too long. They actually end up losing respect from everyone else in the organization because they've waited too long. I'll tell you a quick story about this. Doc Rivers, who I worked with, he was with the Orlando Magic. He said to me once, JP, if you don't deal with the underperformers in the room, you'll lose the room. And what he meant by that is, everyone else in that locker room are going to lose respect because they see that you're not dealing with this person who's letting the whole team down. And so ultimately you're the one who's losing, right? And so that would be a decision. Another one is on the positive side. Sometimes as a manager, we don't move people up fast enough because, for whatever reason. And so, or we don't want to give people feedback. That can be kind of crossed into conversation. I mean, by the way, sometimes there's a whole bunch of areas that this crossed into. One of our clients, KPMG, said, oh my gosh, we see this in audits. They have a whole audit group, as all the big four accounting firms do. And they said, oh my goodness, not a lot. And they didn't have data. This was more anecdotal on their part, but they're like, we think a lot of our auditors don't go and do the last 8%, because that's where it gets a bit dicey. It gets more uncomfortable, right? This is when it gets more emotional for the different people who are in that situation. And generally speaking, we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We want people to like us. And so we tend to avoid. The other part, actually, I have to say, is we also see this as, and it's a smaller part, but sometimes because we don't manage the fear in our brain, so it either can cause us to avoid, but it can also cause us to not be at our best. And so we actually make a mess of it, right? So we have the conversation, but boy, did we ever impact someone, because fear was driving our brain. We couldn't think as clearly as we normally can. And now I've said something that upset the other person. And so we either avoid or we make a mess of it. That's kind of the whole idea around the last 8%. And what's neat is that I've got a whole podcast that's coming out on this concept, which I'm so excited about in the fall.
And of course, these podcasts are hosted forever. So maybe when a person's listening to this, it's already out.
Exactly. Go check out the Last 8% podcast. And what we do on it is we interview really interesting people who both have some expertise that can help us understand, human behavior, because that's really what the podcast is about, helping people become students of human behavior. So we're going to ask them about, human behavior, but also we're going to ask them about their last 8%, when they avoided, when they approached. We have Bill Browder on, who wrote Red Notice, who, I don't know if you know his story, but he was the guy who was an investor in Russia, and he said, hey, there's lots of corruption going on. Putin didn't like it. Putin started to, threaten him. Browder left the country. Putin killed Browder's accountant, Sergei Magnitsky, and now Putin's been driving the Magnitsky Act in the UK and US, Canada. And so we had Bill Browder on, and he talked about facing that last 8%. In fact, he said, amazingly, he said, in that last 8%, I didn't push Sergei to leave the country, and I feel so bad about that now I'm actually not overcompensating, but he said now I'm not afraid to really dive into the last 8%, even though my life is being threatened, because I feel so on purpose to, to make Sergei's life mean something. So it's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. Now, when you think about this word fear, and we don't have time to delve deep, what would you say to the audience here to be able to overcome some of these fears that hinder us? All of us have it at some point or another. Just because JP's talking about it doesn't mean he doesn't, or I don't. I probably had some yesterday. How do we break through these fears, and what would be one or two ways to do it?
Yeah, great question. And it is a lifelong bit of work, because you really got to get to know yourself. So, when I have fear and it comes up in different ways, shapes and sizes, the biggest thing that we do, and this is what the meditation practice, the mindfulness practice is all about, as opposed to when something comes up that we don't like, we have aversion, we want to push it away, or something comes up we like and we want to grab towards it and have attachment. What we really need to do is be able to sit with it without aversion, without attachment. But let's talk about the aversion, because when fear comes up, we have a thought, we have some emotion, we feel it in our bodies. And for many of us, we want to end this feeling. I don't want to feel this. And so we do things to distract ourselves. We do a whole bunch of things, other behaviors that aren't productive, default behaviors that aren't productive, like avoiding, or overcompensating and making a mess of it. So the biggest thing you want to do is actually, and this is going to sound almost woo-woo, but you want to sit there when you're feeling fear, is you actually want to sit there and just feel it, explore it, in fact, is how we talked about it, right? So we've got a little acronym, and the first part is to explore it, is to sit there and just, what does it feel like in my body? What does it feel like in my thoughts, my brain? What does it feel like in my emotions? And just explore it, and just sit there and watch it and see what happens. And what's amazing is that when you explore it like this, you start to see that it comes and it goes. It's like that sine wave that I talked about at the top end of the show. And that's why you want to practice. That's why you do your 10 minutes a day of mindfulness, not just because it literally does change your brain in doing 10 minutes a day in terms of your there's growth in certain parts, the parts that help us control our emotions, number one. But number two, it gives you insight into how things come and go. And because we know, if you know that things come and go, all of a sudden, you don't have to get hooked by it. You can just see it come, and then you see it go. And in that moment, you actually have grown a capability to deal with ever more difficult things, including fear. Now, this is hard for people who've never practiced mindfulness, or, this might not make sense because it's got to be a bit more of an experiential learning. But I'll tell you, this is the promise of mindfulness. This is the promise of learning how our brain works and managing fear, because at the end of the day, we are going to be asked to do more things like this because of the way the world is changing. And those who can do this in a more powerful way, they're the ones who are going to own the world. Alvin Toffler had a great, line. He said, the illiterate of the future will not be able to learn and read and write. The illiterate of the future will be unable to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's where we're at right now. And so this is mission critical for everyone listening. Find a way to learn. Find a way to understand yourself. Grow your skills to manage your brain under pressure, and engage in that last 8%. Because that's when you're going to find, that you feel more proud of yourself, by the way, but you're also going to be more productive and make more things happen.
And of course, we know what fear does to our body and the immune system. It just erodes it and makes us sick and ill, physically as well. And then, of course, as you said, it does affect our ability to make decisions. So whether we decide not to decide, which is a decision,
correct,
or we act on that fear, which then can be aggressive behavior, and then we burn some bridges and relationships as part of it. Well, man, where did our time go, JP? We're already getting to the end of the show.
Yeah, well, listen, I've so enjoyed this. And again, Ken, the great work you've been doing for 3 years now is amazing. And so I feel fortunate to be asked to be part of this.
Well, thank you.
Out there.
Now, before we go, and a couple more questions, so we're not done completely yet, but thank you for that, is how could people find out more about you, JP?
Sure. So, you can Google my name, but I've got a weird name, so best to go to a couple of places. One is, go onto your favorite podcast platform and look for the Last 8% podcast. That's one way. Another way is to go to our organization, which is the Institute for Health and Human Potential, but it's easy just to go ihhp.com. That's p.com. That's another way. That's probably your best bet in terms of getting to know, and the book is in, bookstores kind of everywhere, but what's great is that there's lots of ways that you can access the learning, without necessarily having to go and buy the book. And so, buy the book if you want, by all means. But there's lots.
By the way, the book title is Performance Under Pressure: The Science of Doing Your Best When It Matters Most.
Yeah,
just so that people can look that up. We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Wonderful.
So to wrap up, JP, what would be the last sort of tidbit of wisdom, encouragement, insight you could leave the listeners that you haven't shared up to this point?
Yeah, this is going to sound like kind of bizarre, counsel, so to speak. Counsel sounds such a funny word, a bizarre suggestion, but I do have a really strong belief that we're all going to die soon. And I mean that. And I don't mean like next week. I mean, when we're 85, 90, but it could be sooner than that. I have a wish for folks, which is that you don't, let me back up and say this. I've been to 6 Olympic Games now. And you don't want to leave. The worst thing an athlete or a team can do is leave feeling like we didn't take our shots. Leave with regret. You don't want to leave with regret. You don't want to leave an Olympics with regret. You only get 1 or 2 Olympics. In the same way, we get only one, or, in some ways, we get only one life. And if you're, just by listening to this podcast, you already have so much going for you in the world. When you look at a world population, just that people have self-selected to this podcast says so much about who they are. So don't waste this one life, right? If we're going to die soon, don't waste moments thinking about the past, worrying about the future, worrying about a relationship. No, get into it. Take action. To be honest, that's what the whole Last 8% podcast for me is about, is I want to challenge people to take action on their last 8% because I want people to live feeling the regret that can sometimes happen. That to me is it. So I want to challenge people, and I don't want to wish people good luck as we kind of finish this. I want to wish them two things: not good luck, but good preparation. Learn. Learn about yourself, learn about the world. So not good luck, but good preparation, and then good courage. To really take that risk, to step into that last 8%. You will feel better about yourself for it, and the world will start to be shaped in much more, kind of profound ways that will really, you'll leave and you'll think, no regret, I really went for it.
Well, thank you again, JP. Much, much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Well, SOS listeners, JP has shared a lot. His book is Performing Under Pressure. Go find out more. We'll make sure that his websites are in the show notes. But as JP has shared with you, take action. The last thing you want to do is to be unused at the end of your life, as JP has mentioned. And so our greatest level of contribution is when we are feeling fulfilled ourselves, not from a self-centered point of view, but from a self-honoring point of view. And you bring your best and you do your best and get the skills, find out how you can complete that last 8% in whatever part of your life it is. Maybe it's physical, maybe there's decisions that you haven't made, maybe there are some relationships that you've been avoiding that difficult conversation with. Well, then go just do it, as they say at Nike. So thank you as always for taking your most valuable commodity, your time, and sharing it with us. If you like what we're doing, please share, pass it on, let other people know, leave a positive comment on whatever platform you are consuming this on. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keys.
Thanks for exploring the secrets of success with us. If you want to keep the momentum going, log on to crgleader.com. Scroll to the bottom and sign up for our inspirational emails. You can also take your success to the next level by following us on Facebook and Twitter and connecting with Ken on LinkedIn. We hope you have a great week and look forward to you joining us next time for the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Ken Keys.